Skittish by JMac.
Hello, and welcome to Chalk Family Cemetery.
Thank you,
said Cheerilee, doing her best to summon a smile for the friendly mayor at the cemetery gate. She did not feel like smiling. Cheerilee had wanted very badly to avoid this. She and Big Macintosh were chaperoning a class field day in Manhattan. Huge lines at the Museum of Science and Industry's Science of Fear exhibit had delayed them, and she'd hoped this would make them too late for this last stop on their itinerary. No such luck. They were apparently just in time for the last tour. There was no way out now. No force in Equestria could keep her students from their last visit to the haunted cemetery. The mayor turned to the students and said,
"Good evening, young ones. I'm happy to be your tour guide tonight to the most haunted place in all Equestria. You may call me Dusty."
Wow!
Cool!
Yes! So awesome!
The foals were so excited they almost cheered. Cheerilee herself could not see how the phrase "most haunted place" was something to cheer about. Dusty looked at Cheerilee exactly like a cemetery guide on Nightmare Night. Her coat was white, and so pale Cheerilee thought she might have bleached it for the holiday. Against that pale coat, Cheerilee could barely make out Dusty's cutie mark, a white rosebud. Dusty wore her steel gray mane in a style that hadn't been in fashion for over 30 years, and the frames of her glasses were even older. An antique cameo choker on a black ribbon completed the costume. Despite her friendly demeanor, Cheerilee sensed a sadness about Dusty. She wasn't sure what it was, but it wasn't just part of the act. It hung over Dusty like a shroud. The children didn't seem to notice, but Cheerilee could not resist asking,
"Dear, are you all right?" "What? Oh, yes, I am having a fine evening," said Dusty. "But what about you, ma'am? It's a warm night, but I notice you shudder. You don't want to come into my cemetery, do you?"
"No, I don't suppose I do,"
admitted Cheerilee. She wasn't afraid of many things, but cemeteries were at the top of that short list.
"But I can't disappoint the students."
"Please, miss, they will be fine in my care," said Dusty. "No pony knows these grounds as I do."
"I really need to stay with my students."
It went against Cheerilee's every instinct to leave her class. She could face any fear, even a haunted graveyard in the dark on Nightmare Night Eve, to remain with them. But Cheerilee had other reasons to stay behind. For one, Zecora had approached her that morning before they had left Ponyville, claiming to have received a message for Cheerilee in a dream.
"You need not pass through the scary gate," the zebra had told her. "Fate will sort itself out if you just sit and wait."
Cheerilee didn't know what that meant, and she doubted Zecora did either, but it made a compelling excuse to pass on the tour.
"They are serving hot mulled cider inside the Chalk Mansion," said Dusty. "Why don't you and the gentle colt sit and have a mug or two and a pumpkin donut and wait for us? The tour will not take long."
"Yep," said Big Macintosh. "That sounds good." And that sold it. Cheerilee had to admit she would enjoy a little private time with Big Mac, to let fate sort itself out.
"All righty then. Children, behave with Miss Dusty. We'll see you when you're done."
With that, the foals passed through the gate and joined Dusty on the other side.
"Miss Dusty?"
asked Snails.
"Is this place really haunted?"
"Indeed it is," she answered. "And until 30 years ago it was a dangerous place after dark. Many members of the Chalk family died tragically, and their angry spirits remained here. They were known to vent their anger on the living."
Some of the foals shuddered, and others rolled their eyes to show they weren't impressed by this hokey showmanship, while shuddering inwardly. They all stayed tightly together, and they followed Dusty closely.
"What happened 30 years ago that changed things?"
asked Apple Bloom.
"A new spirit joined the resident ghosts," said Dusty. "Or at least that is what is said. She did not have the same anger about her passing as the others, and in death she continues to care about the living. She is able to protect them, but that is another story. We will get to that shortly."
Diamond Tiara whispered to Silver Spoon.
"She's like having a substitute teacher. You know, fresh meat."
Silver Spoon giggled, but it was more from reflex than from any mirth.
"I understand young ponies enjoy a good scare around Nightmare Night," said Dusty. "If so, you have come to the right place. There is something for every fear you have here in my cemetery. Are any of you afraid of fire? Here lie Forge and Ember Chalk. They were lost in a fire 124 years ago. Workers near these graves often set their clothes alight on their own torches or lanterns. 2 never recovered from their burns."
The foals shifted to stand closer to the center of the path, further from the torches that lit the edge. Dusty pointed down the slope from where they stood.
Do any of you fear drowning? At the base of this hill, at the river's edge, is the grave of Piscador Chalk, who drowned on a fishing trip. During a rainstorm 83 years ago, there was a mudslide near his grave that carried much of the cemetery into the West River. 3 groundskeepers were drowned. In the distance, there might have been the sound of a splash, but it was too faint to be sure. Dusty stopped next to a life-size statue of a pony. Are you afraid of monsters? This is the last resting place of Major Bull Moose, Both Barrels, Chalk, renowned big game hunter. Despite royal decrees against it, he was known to poach for trophies in the Everfree Forest. It is a shame you came too late for the open house at Chalk Mansion. Our taxidermy collection is the finest in Equestria, but it is just as well. On a night like this, many ponies refuse to enter the trophy room. At any rate, the Major's last trophy was supposed to be a cockatrice. This statue is not a statue. It is the Major. There is a time limit on how long you can be restored after turning to stone, and his bearers found him days too late. All of the foal's ears shot up at a sudden hissing sound. Each might have dismissed this just as their imaginations, except when they looked around and saw that all of them had heard it. Diamond Tiara stepped forward and stated petulantly,
Well, I'm not afraid of any of those things.
Dusty regarded her for a moment before speaking.
Dear, there is a small spider in your mane.
What? Get it off me! Get it off me!
Diamond continued to shriek and buck and carry on until she had been assured at least 10 times that the spider had been brushed off.
Every pony is afraid of something, children,
said Dusty.
What scares you, Dusty?
Asked Scootaloo. The young mare sighed.
There was a time when I was afraid of nearly everything. I was always very skittish. I was also horribly shy, and I regret that most of all. It is a shame to be afraid of your fellow ponies when you could be enjoying their company instead. Now, only one thing remains that terrifies me: to be alone in the dark.
A chilly breeze suddenly blew through the cemetery, and all the foals shuddered. At least, they all blamed it on the wind.
Everything is worse when you are alone in the dark. You can always hear something following you, but there is never anything there when you stop to look and listen. Does that mean all you're hearing is the echo of your own hoofsteps? Or perhaps whatever is following you is just very clever and hides when you stop.
Several of the children stopped and looked over their shoulders.
Something always seems to be touching you when you are alone in the dark. It could be a branch or a wind-blown leaf, or just your mind playing tricks on you. Or it could be something else.
Something startled a few of the foals, and they jumped.
When you are alone in the dark, the ground is littered with things that trip you. Many of them are invisible. It is unlikely that any of them actually reached out of the ground and grabbed your ankle. Mind that tree root, young colt.
Ow!
Snip stumbled and went tumbling. Snails had to help him up.
Many ponies are lonely. The loneliest of us, them, come to believe they are used to it. You cannot lie to yourself about that when you are alone in the dark. There the loneliness returns to break your heart. Oh, it is a terrible place to be.
On any other Nightmare Night tour, this would have been the cue for the most cynical foals to roll their eyes again. None did.
But fear not, children,
said Dusty solemnly.
You are not alone in the dark. You are with me. I will not leave you alone in the dark. Thank you, Miss Dusty,
whispered Sweetie Belle. There was a murmur of assent from the others. They came to an imposing stone structure. Above the door was the inscription, "For those who wander lost, alone in the dark, may they all be guided gently home."
Here we are, children. This is the new crypt. New is a relative term, of course. It is only 50 years old. The last of the Chalk family are here. This crypt was built to hold several future generations, but there are only 2 occupants, Slate and Blanca Chalk. Note how the door is ajar and torches are lit inside and out. This is how the crypt is always maintained. When the Chalk family estate was willed to the Equestrian Historical Society, it was on condition that the crypt be kept so, always.
Why is that, Dusty?
Asked Applebloom.
For the Chalk's only daughter, Rosamond. She was like me, very, very afraid to be alone in the dark. I'm sure she would appreciate the gesture if she were here.
Where is she?
Asked Snips. Dusty shook her head.
No pony knows. She simply vanished one night. But there is a story that might explain Rosamond's fate. Would you like to hear it?
Oh, yes, please.
Then walk with me, my children, and I will tell the tale,
said Dusty, starting down the path. The children hurried to stay with her.
Because of her family's money and position, Rosamond could have become a worthless little socialite and done nothing with her life. But that was not her way. Rosamond wanted to teach. She did quite well with her studies, and she soon had a student teaching position with a classroom full of foals much like you children.
That's a good thing, isn't it, Miss Dusty?
asked Twist.
Well, yes, it would be, but for one thing. Rosamond was a terrible teacher.
Oh no, what was wrong?
Poor Rosamond was skittish and shy. She was also uncomfortable speaking before a crowd. Perhaps she could have overcome this with encouragement, but Rosamond didn't get much of that. Her class took advantage of her. Sadly, foals your age can be cruel to substitute teachers.
Gee, that's a shame,
muttered Diamond Tiara, blushing. They were interrupted by the approach of an elderly couple. No pony saw where they came from. They seemed to appear out of a swirl of ground fog.
Excuse us, but have you seen our daughter?
asked the mayor.
No doubt something is holding her,
answered Dusty, smiling at them.
I'm sure she will make her way home as soon as she is able.
Thank you, dearie,
said the stallion. He squinted at Dusty.
Do we know you?
We have met.
The two old ponies wandered away into the night.
Don't mind them, children. It's too bad, really. They have been searching so long that they can no longer recognize their daughter, even if they ever saw her. It is like a curse, and if their daughter ever comes home to them, the curse will be broken and their memories will return. At least, I hope so.
The class, who were already staying very close together, shifted to be just a little closer.
At any rate, back to the story. Rosamond always worked late, grading homework and tests and such, but never too late. She always wanted to be home before nightfall, but there came a bad day for her. A very, very bad day. She had confiscated a notebook her students had been passing around. It was filled with doodles and caricatures of her, all cruel and embarrassing pictures. Her feelings were crushed. Rosamond was heartbroken. She just wanted some time alone to have a good cry. But she lost track of time. Before she knew it, the sun had set. Rosamond would have to walk home alone in the dark.
Meek!
At this, one of the class, it sounded like Snips, let out a little squeak of fear.
As it happened, Rosamond only had to walk one block, one very scary block, before she found some company. She ran into Hammerbrick, the youngest of the city's premier family of stonemasons. Hammer offered to walk Rosamond home.
Uh-oh,
muttered Silver Spoon.
Oh no,
cried Sweetie Belle.
Oh yes,
said Dusty.
Some of you have guessed where this story is going, but poor Rosamond didn't. She wasn't very worldly. She was frightened and vulnerable and lonely. She would have walked home with any pony. At the time, she saw the fact that it was a handsome young stallion as a plus. Eventually, Hammer walked her all the way home to the mansion, but he was not ready to just say goodnight and let her go inside. Hammer suggested that they come back here to the graveyard to spend some private time together, and Rosamond agreed.
Oh man, this story doesn't have a happy ending, does it?
asked Scootaloo.
I'm afraid not, dear,
said Dusty.
If this is too disturbing, we don't have to finish.
Are you kidding? Dusty, you have to finish now. Yeah!
All the children agreed.
Very well. As I said, Hammer led them back here where it is private, to share a few moments of romance. And while she found the attention exciting, Rosamond soon wanted to stop. Hammer did not. But Hammer had one trick left to play. To keep Rosamond with him a few moments longer, Hammer used her curiosity against her. He offered to share a secret with her.
They came to another stone structure, this one much older than the new crypt. It was covered with ivy and moss, and much of the stonework had been repaired. Dusty led them to the side of the building.
This is the old crypt. This is where Hammer brought Rosamond that night. And this is what he showed her.
Dusty reached out and touched a stone. No pony saw exactly which one, and a section of the wall slid in.
Wow!
Exclaimed Snips.
A secret passage! This is so cool!
Why did they build a secret door into the crypt?
Asked Applebloom.
That is a very good question. Rosamond asked that herself,
said Dusty.
Unfortunately, it never occurred to Hammer that she would ask this obvious question, and he couldn't tell her the answer.
Why not?
Asked Sweetie Belle.
Because in addition to being stonemasons, the Brick family were what was called resurrectionists.
What's that?
Asked Scootaloo.
It means they were grave robbers,
said Silver Spoon.
Indeed it does,
said Dusty.
There is a door like this installed in every crypt in the city the Brick family built or repaired. A pony would be laid to rest in the afternoon, and by midnight, the bricks would take them away and sell them to an anatomy professor. Rosamond was very upset, of course. When Hammer could not quiet her any other way, he pushed her, and when he saw her lying, head bloody, on the crypt floor, he panicked. Hammer slammed the secret door shut and ran away.
There were tears in the eyes of half of the class. Dusty went on as if in a trance.
If he had bothered to check, he would have discovered that she wasn't dead yet. A doctor might well have saved her. As it was, she later revived for a while, just long enough to realize where she was and what had happened to her. It really is a shame the Brick family turned to a life of crime. They did not need to. They were truly masters of their craft. When closed, this door fits perfectly, as if the wall were solid, and no pony can hear through it, no matter how loudly you scream.
Dusty shook her head as if to clear it.
Oh dear. Oh children, I'm so very sorry. I've said too much. Said things you shouldn't have to hear. Please, let me guide you out of here.
Wait, what happened to Hammer?
Demanded Silver Spoon.
Something horrible, I hope.
If you insist, then I'll tell you,
said Dusty, sighing.
Hammer began to drink. Most likely he was driven to it by guilt. He wasn't naturally a murderer, after all. He was merely a coward and weak, and he most likely would have drunk himself to death if he had continued. Instead, one night he ran into the river not far from here and drowned. Witnesses say that, ironically, he appeared to be running for his life. That was very foolish of him. What he was fleeing from would not have cared to chase him.
Look!
Cried Twist, pointing down the hill towards the river. It was difficult to make out what she was seeing through the shadows, but it appeared to be a stallion looking over the fence.
No need to worry about him, said Dusty. He knows he isn't welcome here, and he won't try to come in. Now, that is enough spooky stories for tonight. It is time for you to go.
Wait a minute,
snapped Diamond Tiara.
This whole story's just made up. You couldn't possibly know any of this.
Dusty graced her with a smile.
You're a very clever young filly, and you are right, of course. Only 2 ponies could have known about any of this, and both of them are long dead. For this to be a true story, I would have to be a ghost.
Diamond just stood there with her mouth open. Then, in the distance, a tower clock chimed.
Oh dear, I've lost track of the hour again,
said Dusty.
I am very sorry, children, but I have run out of time. I cannot keep my promise.
Then she stepped into the crypt, and the door slammed shut.
Dusty! Go!
Oh no!
Every torch in the cemetery flared and went out.
Wow!
Gasped Snails.
This is the best Nightmare Night tour ever!
Give it up, guys,
said Scootaloo.
She said it herself. That wall is soundproof. She can't hear you. She has to be able to hear us. She just has to,
cried Sweetie Belle frantically.
Because if she can't hear us, then she's all alone. Just like we are out here,
said Diamond Tiara. Apple Bloom began tapping all over the wall.
Did any pony say what she touched? Do you have any idea how to open this thing?
None of them did. They tried pressing everything. In the dark, they could barely see the wall. This made the light that suddenly shined on them all the more startling.
Hey, you kids! Just what do you think you're doing?
It was a very angry groundskeeper with a lantern. Cheerilee and Big Mac were with him.
How did you get in here anyway?
Mister, help us!
Called Sweetie Belle.
Miss Dusty is trapped in the crypt.
Miss Dusty? I don't know where you heard that name, but it's not funny, kid.
The children's guide was a Miss Dusty, sir,
said Cheerilee.
The last tour was over 2 hours ago,
said the ground stallion.
All the guides and actors have gone home, and no pony called Dusty works here. If they did, they would never go by that name.
That was how she introduced herself, sir,
said Cheerilee. The older pony shook his head.
Dusty was a nickname us kids gave Miss Chalk way back when. You know, like chalk dust. We thought it was funny, but really it was just mean.
You knew Rosamond Chalk, mister?
She was my teacher, for a couple of months anyway. Back when I was your age. She was a skittish little thing, but that wasn't a reason to be cruel. Miss Chalk was smart as a whip, and she always tried to be nice, even when we weren't nice at all. She could have taught us lots of stuff, if we just behaved for her. And she sure didn't deserve whatever it was that took her away from us.
I found it!
Cried Apple Bloom, and the secret door to the crypt slid open.
Well, I'll be!
Exclaimed the groundskeeper. He shined his lantern into the crypt, but even without the light, it was obvious that no pony was there.
Mister, shine your light a little lower,
said Apple Bloom.
There's something on the floor.
The light revealed the skeleton of a little pony. At its throat was an old cameo choker. Every pony was silent for a very long time. The first to speak was Snails.
Does this mean Miss Dusty isn't gonna step out from behind a tree and take a bow?
It means we guide her gently home now,
Said Applebloom.
and we keep the lights on for her,
Added Sweetie Belle.
so she'll never be alone in the dark again.